Bob and Mark, the grumpy scientists, afflicting you once again.
Yeah, we're waiting for our guest victim.
Yeah,
so we're going to treat you with someone else so you can hear somebody else talk, and maybe get him in trouble.
And we're reminiscing warmly about our hater. We've got one.
Yeah, we noticed that.
Him.
You know, the last time we
know
talked
there's
about
many more that aren't brave enough to click the thumbs down. But
they'll change their
we
minds
got one hater,
that.
And that's okay.
Well, you know,
that's
he doesn't like, and we might as well mention it. He doesn't like us talking about accuracy and precision of commodity, commercial grade computer systems not doing well. So we just thought,
so that's
give him
your
another
basic,
shout out.
You know, hey, I got myself a $12 mouse here, and I'm going to use that to measure your brain.
Hey, we're going to measure that to do reaction times. Great, buddy.
Doesn't work, and it's been proven and demonstrated.
He or she. I don't want to make assumptions.
We'll say.
Yeah.
Since haters are kind of, there's no gender in there.
Anyway, we think we're going to do an homage, a little tribute to one of my favorite videos by Ron White. You can't fix stupid.
You the man.
Now he is not G-rated. Now he's not G-rated. So, and we usually are, at least PG.
Family friendly.
Yeah, we're family friendly.
We are bureaucracy unfriendly.
We put everyone to sleep equally, but
I think that's true. I fall asleep sometimes. You don't even notice it.
But we both had similar. We both had similar conversations with a couple. And actually, I started listing stuff for our "You Can't Fix Stupid" tutorial, or we call it a tutorial, or a homage
to Mr. White.
Yeah. And it got quite long, so but we're going to try to keep it thematic. And
I think we can kind of sort of keep it thematic. And the one that I thought we should discuss today, our favorite topic, the placebo effect.
Oh yeah, all our work is placebo related, by the way.
That's right. And by the way, there is a trend which people are studying that placebo effect is generally kind of like a rule of thirds kind of thing, right? You know, sort of like a third of people will have a placebo. So 33% of people, you know, they take a sugar tablet or something with no active ingredient. They're like, oh, I do feel better. I do feel whatever. So, you know, people who've been selling snake oil and everything for a long time have been leveraging this placebo effect. It's been studied for a very long time. The psychosomatic effects on the body. If somebody really believes something, it can be powerful enough in some cases to effect a cure. I think
it's kind of interesting that we got several published papers, like I think 7 or 8 now, where we studied the effect of either a drug, and we use a double-blind placebo, or where we gave a drug to half the people and a placebo to half the people, and we tested them throughout the course of how long the drug lasted, and the measure stayed flat out the same for the people on placebo, but then changed significantly for the people that were not on the placebo.
Placebo effect is real.
Yeah, and that was actually on dextromethorphan, a very very weakly cough syrup. But you know, we did that for TMS, where we put something over their head and blasted their head. Right. Well, the people who were getting the sham TMS, which sounds just like TMS, so they don't know the difference. They tested normal the whole time, and then the people on the TMS, well, they didn't test normal. We did it with TDCS, but the guy doing the study did put the coils in the wrong place. Right, so everybody tested the same all the way through.
Right. Well, you end up with the thing is that the placebo effect. People have been studying this for a long time. They've been studying the placebo effect because it's real. And people act as if it's not real, and they say things like, well, they just feel better or they want to feel better. But there seems to be something much more kind of deep and important about the placebo effect. And there are people who study this placebo effect with the intent that if we can somehow understand the neural mechanisms
Keep talking.
of it.
I'm going to go grab our guest.
I think our guest is like bumping against the door. That's okay. So if we can somehow understand the neurocognitive, complexities of the placebo effect, probably involves emotion, all kinds of other things, that we can actually leverage that to effect cures. And people have been studying this. And recently, in the last 2 or 3 years, there's actually been quite a number of papers published on the fact that, well, the placebo effect is growing. And what does that mean? Placebo effect increases. Well, what that means is that instead of 30 or 33%, now it's like 40% or 45%. And I have recently talked to 2 colleagues who say they've measured it as high as 70%. And the interesting thing about the placebo effect is that the effect is applied with different standards as a disparagement to people who do research. So say, for example, you come up with a new way to prevent pain. And you say, well, that pain was diminished by this drug. Then they apply the basic standard of, 33%, and that's the placebo effect. And if you can show more than 33% of an effect, you can exclude placebo. Interestingly, if you are looking at, you guys don't sound very grumpy to me. What's all that laughing about? If you apply an intervention that is much more than 30 or 40% effective, people don't really go back and say, well, that's just, that must be effective because it's way beyond placebo. The actual excuse that people are using now is that the placebo effect is larger. And this is our guest victim.
Hello.
Hello. This is our guest victim, Dr. Jeff McDonald.
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know we were going to give his name. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we give our names. We get raw exposure. And this guy's a victim. He's not like he's not somebody we're worried about.
Yeah. Did you tell your placebo story?
I was just sort of telling my placebo story as you guys were down there laughing and interrupting me.
As you guys, as the viewers know, that viewer knows that we basically,
we got at least 2.
Yeah, we basically one shoot, one run, and you happen to show up in the middle of one of these shows.
Grumpy Science. We have friends. Do you? Can you prove it? Send us an email.
We're trying to prove it. We brought Dr. Jeff.
If you don't have a friend, we'll feel bad for you. And if you do, hey, good for you, right?
Actually, we tricked him. We thought this was a scientific.
You can leave now.
We told him it was a scientific symposium, so
right.
he showed up.
Yeah, I thought we were going to be talking about diabetes and the brain to the liver sort of link.
Actually, this is one of our You Can't Fix Stupid episodes. So,
well, the You Can't Fix Stupid thing, the topic we're talking about is the placebo effect. And I just want to see his facial expression when, because Mark and I each have a placebo effect story, right? So right here in this room, actually right in this seat, I told a colleague of mine that I had this really great thing to deal with inflammation. And he's a surgeon. He's actually chairman of a department of surgery at a big university. He's like, oh, wow, really? That would be great. Handle pain. I showed him the data, or handle inflammation. He said, wow, that's really great. And I showed him, and he's like, wow, what was it that did that? That's really big. That's really compelling. And I said, well, it's pulsed electromagnetic fields. And he said, he actually tisked me. He goes, the placebo effect is 70% now. And I said, really? On rats? In a GLP lab with like multiple layers of controls? Yeah, it's 70%, right? So instantly when he recognized that it wasn't sort of something in the pipe for like a drug, a chemical, just instantly flipped to the disparagement mechanism of, oh, that's just placebo effect. There's nothing, right? As if just throw that one out because it's a device that uses electromagnetism, right? Mark has a great story.
Yeah, I have a good story. Yeah, I was giving a talk. This was I was out in Denver, and a group of scientists, room full of scientists there, and one of the guys was a former head administrator of all things TBI at NIH.
So this is like the highest level person paid by the United States government, okay, to evaluate and promote research in traumatic brain injury.
I gave about an hour talk on the basics of the brain gauge and how we were studying stuff, and I was going through everything, and then I showed some data where we showed people that had suffered from traumatic brain injury they had chronic TBI for years, months and years.
Intractable, not responsive to anything else.
Just hadn't returned. And then they got treated. And then I showed before they got treated, during treatment, after treatment. And after treatment, their scores looked really good. And he got really excited. I said, wow, that's really great. What drug were they using? And I said, no drug. He said, well, what was it? It's pulse electromagnetic field. And he looked and he said, oh, those patients just got better because they wanted to. And I was like,
which is awesome because prior to that, they actually were kind of cultivating, I don't know, disability or something.
Yeah.
Just that in that moment, they thought, you know what, just because it's PEMF, I'm with the program now, so I'm actually going to get better.
The interesting part of that was the entire room turned on him. And after that, he had no credibility. Right. And then all the conversations after that, everybody just kind of totally discounted everything he said.
So the tide is turning slowly, and a lot of these people who will just disparage anything that's not direct mainstream pharmacologic interventions, they're kind of, people, even at a professional level, people are starting to get tired of it. But
didn't you say, though, it was like $500 million or $500 billion?
$500 billion.
The pain.
So there's a lot of money at stake. So chronic pain, as my esteemed
colleague
Jeff remembers. Right, exactly. Well, the thing is, if it's costing, the U.S. government, actually it's closer to 2/3 of $1 trillion, it's more than the defense budget, somebody somewhere is making money on that. Right? Mm-hmm. So they're not really looking for a big sea change in how we manage pain. And that's a fact. But here's what I think. Not that I ever say that. I'm a grumpy scientist. But I'm going to actually tell you what I think right now. I actually think the big placebo for pain is...
sugar pills?
Ta-da! Opioids.
Opioids.
Because as a chronic pain sufferer, I took opioids, and it didn't reduce my pain. It simply made me not care about it as much, which is precisely what placebo means, right? It sort of placated me. Like, whatever. I know I'm still in pain. I'm just not so concerned about it.
How does the pulse field work? I remember being on, one of your committees thinking it was maybe calcium flux back and forth was one, but what was that?
Nobody knows. The mechanism of biophysical transduction of PEMF remains completely obscure. There's a bunch of different theories. My thinking on it is that it induces ion flux in paramembranous space, not transmembrane, which is why we don't see it with patch clamps, because we exclude all of that stuff. And there's probably I think there's a whole class of receptors, membrane receptors, that have not been elucidated because we can't isolate individual ions going perpendicular to the surface of that we can do that with like a glass pipette drawn out for patch clamping, but we can't detect individual ions in the other direction. So I think, because it makes sense to me, and you can calculate, what would the ion flux be and everything is straight from, it's electromagnetism, it's classical electromagnetism. But we can't measure it. And the other thing is people aren't looking for it because electromagnetic effects on biology are viewed as hokum, right? Even though vision, that's electromagnetism. The perception of radiated heat, that's electromagnetism, right? Electrochemical, chemoelectric coupling, that, how nerves make muscles contract, that's electromagnetism. There's a lot of things that biology responds to on the electromagnetic spectrum, 5 or 6 ones I counted that I know of. So what's to say, well, there's not one more, we just haven't elucidated it. So the answer to Jeff's question is we don't know how it works. But it seems
to be our normal answer to about every question we get. We don't know.
I think that's a fair. answer. People appreciate somebody actually being
flux back and forth across the outside of the membrane. So you're saying that it would go.
I think it's transduced that way, and this was actually first proposed in the 1960s. It was called streaming currents. It was a streaming current hypothesis. Well, so you know about that, right? Mm-hmm. So streaming currents, and the hypothesis was that how can an organism detect that it's ambulatory and moving versus like it's sleeping or it's incapacitated or in a coma, right? Because we all know just getting around and walking makes you a heck of a lot more healthy than sitting at a desk all day. And if you're incapacitated, or if you're like astronauts and you're not loading your musculoskeletal system, you lose not just bone mass, but you lose tendon and muscle and everything, right? So how does the body detect that it's actually getting those normal low-level loads? And when you calculate them, the microstrain is way too small on bones for it to be transduced by any mechanism that we can look at. It turns out there's 5 or 6 competing hypotheses, and the one that makes the most sense to me is that you actually have the ability to, if you imagine tissues as like a sponge and you put salt water in it, when you squeeze the sponge, if you could track ion movement, you could measure extremely small, displacements, changes in volume of the sponge, right? So this has been around since before I was born, this theory, and it's based on streaming currents, and the idea is that somehow cells are able to detect those. But the only reason we know about voltage gated channels as well as we do is because we can isolate one and we can look at the effects when we drop a charge through one, right? But we don't have the same technique because we can't just poke in a drawn glass pipette, and we can do that and take a plug out of a membrane, but we can't do it the other way. So far as I know, there's no way for us to isolate.
That's interesting because working in really high field magnetic fields with my MRI, which is one of the things I do, is down in Florida they have this huge 500 megahertz 14 Tesla magnet, and if you go too fast across those the magnetic field lines, you get really dizzy, so that can induce little microcurrents in there too,
Well, it might be moving the otoliths around, and your eyes like, whoa, all of a sudden you've got that whatever they call it, a benign vertigo, sort of thing. Exactly what it's like. So yeah, there's you can actually sit around and hypothesize what these things are. As scientists, what do? We try to construct a plausible, testable hypothesis, right? And then we construct that explains what we see. And then we try to construct another plausible, testable hypothesis that's different. And then you try to contrive some kind of experiment that will exclude one of those two possibilities, because one hypothesis would predict some outcome, and the other hypothesis, because it's a different mechanism, would predict a different outcome. And you run your experiment, you see which outcome you get, and it tells you which one's more likely to be right, which one's more likely to be wrong. But anyway, so that's the thing, and the process of not doing that is called disparagement, and the way that they disparage devices trying to deal with pain and non-pharmacologic things is by simply saying it's placebo effect, and you can't fix stupid.
Well, that's what I thought we were going to talk about.
You're holding us to something that's written down?
Oh my God,
he took those.
Well,
it says, I'm like,
we only got through one of our you can't fix stupid topics.
It's unscripted.
Yes,
Mark sent him a text. He was innocent. He said, we're probably going to talk about this or that.
Grumpy administrators, I got all the
we'll save that for the next video. Okay, tune into the next video where,
we have to stop now,
Jeff hops in and tells us about his you can't fix stupid ideas.
This is awesome. Okay, well, we'll see you in a few minutes or a few hours. You don't know.